everybody, in this video I'm going to do my June and July reading wrap up. I did not do my usual wrap up for June because I was just so busy with school then, and also June wasn't exactly like my best reading month. Overall, the last 2 months when it comes to reading have been a bit messy, a bit all over the place. I still have read some amazing books, but a lot of those were also rereads from some of my old favorites, so as you can understand it was a bit of a chaotic reading atmosphere, if that makes sense. So I do have some books to talk about today, but I thought it would be best to just combine my wrap-ups for June and July, since doing a very late June wrap-up separately just wasn't really doing it, like it wasn't really adding it, because I don't have that many books to talk about anyway. And in the past 2 months I did read 8 books, so it isn't bad, it's just a bit messy, and mostly because I read so much for school, and because of that reading for fun in free time took a bit of a backseat. But yeah, I feel like I've been rambling long enough now. Let's just tell you all about the books that I've read in June and July, and yeah, let's just get started with this video. The first book that I finished in the beginning of June was Out of the Easy by Ruta Sepetys. This book tells the story of a young girl named Josie. She is the daughter of a prostitute and she lives in New Orleans in the 1950s. Josie is very bright and very smart, and she's doing everything she can to get out of the city and make a better life for herself. So I picked this one up because so far I had been very much in love with Ruta Sepetys' other work, Salt to the Sea and Between Shades of Grey, so I just had to read Out of the Easy because it had been on my shelves for ages. And I did enjoy it, but unfortunately I wasn't a massive fan of it as I was with her other books. It is hard to explain because it's not like there was something that was actively bad about it. It just didn't really manage to grab my attention the entire way through, even though there were some very interesting plot points. And I did think that Josie was a very compelling main character. I did like to read about her story and her life, but I feel like the book was just going around, jumping from place to place a bit too randomly. I wasn't completely getting everything that was happening. I wasn't feeling it. I know that's very cliche and like very basic to say about a book, but I wasn't completely feeling it all of the time. Sometimes I was, but sometimes it just, I don't know, I just had no feeling with it. Also because I did read this at the beginning of June, it's hard to remember like the points of critique that I had. Apart from that, it has been a little while. But yeah, I think that was my overall impression, that it was okay, it was definitely interesting, but it did not grab me, it did not manage to hold my attention as the other 2 books did. I think that's also because it didn't have that much of an emotional punch as the other 2 books did. I guess that's mostly the reason. And in the end I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And then I did one of the first of many rereads that I did in the past 2 months, and I read The Other Berlin Girl by Philippa Gregory. If you know me, then you know that this is one of my all-time favorite books and that I've read it many times before. The Other Berlin Girl tells the story of Mary Boleyn, who is the lesser known sister to Anne Boleyn, who was the second wife of King Henry VIII. So it tells the story from Mary Boleyn's eyes, but it's also about Anne Boleyn and her rise to power and their rivalry and everything. It's just, I love it so much, not because I think this book is a masterpiece on its own. I think it does have some flaws, like it makes the story very dramatic, almost like a soap, and just all over the top and all over the place. Very Game of Thrones-ish, which is fun as well. Like, it's definitely fun, but it's not always historically accurate. But I do especially love this book because this is one of the first things that introduced me to the story of Anne Boleyn. And I just love Anne Boleyn so much. She's my favorite historical character. I've said this many times before, but I will keep saying it. That's also why like Anne Boleyn and the court of King Henry VIII was my thesis topic, so I have delved into this subject a lot over the past 2 months. And yeah, The Other Berlin Girl, I listened to it on audiobook. It was amazing. The new version is narrated by Vanessa Kirby, who you might know from The Crown as Princess Margaret, the young Princess Margaret. Love it. I always love listening to this book. It's always amazing. If you want to start out with Philippa Gregory, I would recommend The Other Berlin Girl as your first book. And yeah, that's all I have to say about it because it's one of my favorite books. I've talked about it many times before. Another reread was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This book is about a woman named Eleanor Oliphant who always says that she's completely fine, she does everything in her own way, she has a very strict routine. At the beginning of the book she might seem very weird to you because she seems a bit out of touch, she's not the best with her social skills. But throughout the book she meets another co-worker named Raymond, and they sort of get mixed up together when they see an old man collapsing on the streets. From there on the story takes some twists and turns and you get get to know Eleanor better and you get to know her backstory and why she is the way that she is. Again, this is a book that I've read before. I've read it twice before, I believe. Yeah. And again, I reread it through audiobook, and again, I just really loved it because this story is so beautiful, so pure, and it always makes me care for Eleanor so much. And I just love it. It always gives me all the emotions, and this time was no exception. And that's probably why I reread so many books that I love during busy school times, because they just make me feel warm and loved, and they make me happy. And yeah, Eleanor Oliphant, definitely popular for a reason if you ask me, because it's one of my favorites again. Then I actually read another new book, like another reread. I know, shocking, but that was Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This is the first Octavia E. Butler book that I've ever read, and I picked it up, I think, during the end of June, somewhere along those lines. This book tells the story of a young woman named Dana. Dana is a black woman who lives in the 1970s, but somehow she's being transported back into time to the beginning of the 19th century to save the life of a young boy named Rufus, and Rufus is the son of a slave owner. And because of her skin color, Dana is of course presumed a slave in the past, and every time somehow she has this weird connection with Rufus. And when he is in mortal danger, she is being transported back into time, and she has to cope with living in these different times and living as a slave basically. So this was such an interesting and powerful read, and I loved it so much. I think it was very, very well written, especially because it takes the perspective of someone in the present, because as it was written, this book actually comes from the 1970s, it was the present, and how you would react if you were being transported back into the past during those very different times and during those very different circumstances. It's interesting to see how Dana deals with that, what she does to survive and everything. It's just such a powerful and eye-opening read, and again, I think it was very, very well written. So yeah, a bit of historical fiction, but with like a time traveling twist. It's hard to explain. I feel like you really should read this book for yourself to completely understand. But I really loved it, and it was definitely a book that got me very, very hooked and interested from the beginning onwards. And I think that is just something that makes a book amazing, and it was so well written and just wow, definitely something that I can recommend to everybody. Next up, another reread, and this one was of An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. Again, one of my favorite books. I read it last year. Really loved it. It's about a girl named April May, and she discovers a very weird and mysterious statue that she names Carl. She makes a video with it. That video goes viral, and it turns out that there are these Carl statues all over the world. April May becomes very famous, and it's about internet fame, going viral, social media. But then it's also a very weird book because there's sort of like a sci-fi twist to it, and it's just insane. Like, it is very, very weird and definitely something of a different kind of book. But I loved it so much because it's both very relatable and very realistic when it comes to like the social media stuff, but also very strange and weird when it comes to like the other parts. It is just, I loved it so much. And of course the reason that I was rereading it is because the sequel has just come out. The sequel is called A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, and I'm actually reading that right now, so I am continuing with the story of April May and everything, and it's just, oh, wonderful so far. And yeah, that's why I reread this, and again, it's amazing as always. And the next reread was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. The reason that I reread this one is because of the Amazon Prime adaptation that has just come out. So I watched the TV show based on this book, and I really enjoyed it, but it also made me want to reread the actual book because it has been, I think, 3 years since I first read it. Anyway, I still really loved it, and I actually think I prefer the book to the series because, I don't know, I think the book handles some things a lot better than the TV show does. Maybe you should know the premise. Little Fires Everywhere is about a huge family with 4 children. At the beginning of the book, their house has been burned down and they suspect the youngest child, Izzy, has done it. And then the book goes a couple of months back, and it's about the rental home from this family called the Richardson family. And a mother with a teenage daughter comes to live there, and that's sort of the start of a lot of events that are being set into motion. It is a very weird premise to explain. It's basically people in a small town, things are happening, exciting things, but also tragic things, dramatic things. It is just very, very well written. I really love Celeste Ng's writing style and just her writing in general. Like, everything she writes, even though it has only been 2 books so far, has been like amazing. And I reread this because of the TV show. Like, I was inspired. I want to read, like, compare it with the TV show. do really prefer the book and very happy that I reread it also through audiobook. Then I have a Dutch book that is also a reread, and it was Zondagskind by Judith Visser, which would translate as Sunday's Child, and it is only in Dutch and German available right now, so I'm sorry, it's probably not interesting for everybody. It is a book based on Judith Visser's own life, the author's own life. It's about a young girl who grows up with autism, but she doesn't know that she has autism, and nobody in her surroundings, not her family or friends or her school, knows that she has autism. So she struggles with a lot of things, and she does not know why she always feels so different from everybody else, how certain things that are very logical to most people aren't logical to her, and the other way around. It's about her growing up and dealing with that, and it's again based on the author's own life. It is wonderfully written. You really feel for her, and also she is so sweet, the main character, and it's just, oh, beautiful story, again, something that I love so much. And I do wish that there was an English translation available, because I feel like everybody should read this book because it's amazing. So well written, so captivating. And yeah, if there ever is an English translation, of course I will let you know immediately. And then the last book of this reading wrap up is actually not a reread, it is The Seven Sisters by Lucinda Riley. So this is the first book in a series called The Seven Sisters. It's about 6 sisters who are all adopted by this billionaire elusive father, and at the beginning of the book, or like every book in the series, the father dies and he leaves them all a clue about their true heritage, where they've come from and how they ended up being adopted. So this is the first book, and it's about the oldest sister named Maya. Her story takes her back to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and she learns about her past and everything. And then every other book in the series is about another sister and about them finding out that their father has died and finding the clue and everything. You probably get the premise. So the Seven Sisters, it was fun, it was entertaining, but it was not amazing. I feel like this is definitely one of the perfect summer books that you want to read if you just don't want to think about it too much, because it is such a mind-numbing read. It is fun, but also it's not very plausible. Like, there are some plot holes, it's a bit over the top and dramatic. It's not very believable in a lot of ways, so that is just not because of the story, but also the way it is being written and how the characters are written. But this was definitely a nice book to read when I was busy with school again, because it's just so different from like long history books. It's just fun and relaxing, and for that I really enjoyed it. But also there were some aspects to it that I was just like, why? I don't feel like it really adds anything to the story. Also some things happen so quickly that it's just not believable. So overall I did give it 3 out of 5 stars, because it's just, I don't know, like, it is fun, it is nice, but not amazing, and it makes you roll your eyes a lot. But it was still fun, and I am actually reading the second book right now, which is about the second sister. It feels a bit of the same. There's, by the way, also a historical fiction element to it. It's basically 2 stories in one book, and I'm not sure about it. It's just, I don't know, but it is fun and just nice. If you want to read a book just for the fun of it, then this is probably your book, but also it is very over the top. And that was it for my reading wrap up. It has been quite a while since I filmed one. It just feels like I'm a bit out of practice, but hopefully it was still sort of enjoyable. And again, a lot of rereads. I'm not planning to reread as much for August, but you know, I always reread books because I just really love to do that, and yeah. But I do want to read some new books as well this time around. So hopefully, like, the reading wrap-ups from now on will be a bit more newish, but you never know with me. But this was it then for this video, and I really hope you liked this video. And if you did, maybe go subscribe, give it a thumbs up or whatever. I would always really appreciate that. And hopefully I will see you again very soon in one of my next videos. Bye!